We all want cheaper drugs, right? But I wish this bill addressed all of the issues that make drug development so expensive. And one thing I would love to see in the bill is to piggyback off of COVID. How were we able to come up with so many vaccines in a year and cut through so much red tape? If we could take those lessons and incorporate those into a bill that could help people faster and cut through some of the bureaucratic red tape, I would be all for this bill. But just because you put a price cap on a drug doesn't mean it's any cheaper.
The rent is too damn high and drug prices are too damn high. All we need to do is cap drug prices and then prescription drugs are cheaper and everyone gets healthier. So says anyone who knows anything about economics. This woman is wrong about it. Amber Freed, thanks for being with me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, first, tell me about your kids. You have 3-year-old twins.
They are precious.
No, they're not.
Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah, they're trouble.
Oh, I'll show you pictures. Their names are Maxwell and Riley. They are 3 years old, and they are the best of friends. They love dogs, eating blue Play-Doh, and each other.
I hope they love each other, not eating each other, because
That's right.
that could be a problem. You've had some challenges with Maxwell. Tell me about him.
I have. He wasn't progressing like his sister shortly after birth, and he wasn't playing with toys. He looked like he was trapped in his body, and he never slept.
What do you mean trapped in his body?
He couldn't use his hands at all. He had never held a toy. He couldn't coordinate his movement at all, and he couldn't even hold his head up properly. He was totally limp.
That has got to be terrifying.
Terrifying.
All right, so you brought him to the doctor, and they said what?
At first they said, Amber, you're a crazy new mom. But this is a thing. That's true. I'm type A, I'm nuts, and I loved my...
And you're overprotective of your kids.
Absolutely. Right. But mother's intuition said, I just wish you were right this time.
You knew?
Oh, yeah.
What did you know?
I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. And it was very hard to get in to see the right doctors at Children's, but eventually I did. And it was a terrifying diagnostic odyssey I wouldn't wish upon anybody.
I've been there. I know what that's like, and it is terrifying. For both my children, the daughter I lost and my son with Down syndrome, yeah, we've been frequent flyers down at Children's. I'm glad they are there. So what was the final diagnosis after, because I know it takes forever, and it's an art, not a science. What does your son deal with?
He was diagnosed with SLC 6A1.
Everybody knows about that one. What is that?
I had no idea.
I've never heard of it.
My first thought was he's been diagnosed with a flight number to Salt Lake City. I was beyond confused. I looked back at the doctors and said, what's the name of the disease? And they explained the disease was too rare to have a name, so it's known only by the genetic location.
Too rare to have a name. So it's there on the genetic, so is it a genetic abnormality?
It is. It's a genetic mutation.
That's exactly what my daughter died of.
I'm so sorry.
And well, it's been almost 20 years now, and it's still something that haunts me. And at that time, there was only one other person on all their databases throughout the world who had that same genetic mutation, and that person, that girl, was in France. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like there was a lot there. It's rare. And I've heard the phrase, the high probability of low probability events. And my life with my children have proved just that. And your son is one of the victims of a very low probability event. How's he doing?
I wish we could have just won the lottery instead with these chances. He's doing all right. The disease is progressive neurodevelopmental, so a movement disorder similar to Parkinson's, speech apraxia, can't talk, intellectual disability, and it progresses into a debilitating form of epilepsy for which no drugs can really treat it. And of course, if your brain is atrophying with epilepsy, you begin to lose all of those skills you fought so hard to gain.
So here you're looking at a terrifying diagnosis. But isn't there a drug? Isn't there a procedure? Isn't there an operation? Isn't there something that can be done for Maxwell?
No, there is nothing. They can symptomatically treat the problems that lead to disease, but there's nothing that actually can help him. And every drug that might be able to offset one symptom creates 4 new problems, and terrible problems. Like the drug is actually worse than what they're trying to help.
The term, the cure is worse than the disease, is true a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what has this got to do with drug pricing? You wrote a piece for Colorado Politics in the Gazette about your opposition to capping drug pricing. Help me connect the dots on that.
Rare diseases are very expensive because we're considered too rare to care. We're considered too rare to care by the government. What is the point of making a massive NIH grant for a population, a very small population? For pharmaceuticals, it's incredibly expensive to research and develop drugs, especially for a rare group of patients. And lastly, even by academic institutions, scientists want to be published, and what's the point on a super rare disease? So the cost of drug development in rare diseases stifles that of large diseases, and thus they're very expensive because you need a payback.
You know, what I found, my son has Down syndrome, is that people with different issues fall into these groups, and the group that yells the loudest gets the most funding. Mm-hmm. For a long time, Down syndrome got almost no funding from National Health Services. God bless folks like Michelle C. Whitten, who is out there fighting to change
my hero.
it. Oh, she's a pistol. And what you see is whoever can yell the loudest gets more funding. The AIDS community, God bless them, were able to yell very loudly, and now their lives are extended with cocktails and medications that are there. Other diseases don't. And so just like politics, if you don't have a loud enough, threatening enough constituency, it's hard to do it. And your rare diseases, they're all over the place.
All over.
You know, my daughter's mutation caused something called cord plexus carcinoma. And your son's mutation is causing something closer to Parkinson's or epilepsy. It's not like there's a club for rare diseases. You're just in this little world all by yourself with fighting this rare disease. Mm-hmm. Is there a possibility of hope for your son? Is there a possibility that some sort of gene therapy could help him?
There is, because I decided to fight like a mother. The last thing I was going to accept was what doctors told me. I left my career that day, started calling hundreds of scientists, now it's up to thousands, and I found that for Maxwell, 1/2 of a very important gene in his body is not working. Just flat out not working. But technology exists today to outright replace that gene, and it is the closest thing to a cure any children will know in their lifetime.
So out of this huge, complex string of DNA and all these different genes, yeah, one that's bad.
Just one.
Just one. I remember that feeling. It's like, how could that be just this one mutation right here? But when I went through it, there was no chance of gene therapy, and there wasn't enough time to save her. But with your son, if there was the drugs and the research to do this, do you think that there's a solution out there?
Oh, we're already halfway to our solution.
Explain that.
Within 2 months of Maxwell's diagnosis, I had identified that he was a candidate for gene replacement therapy. I had I started sending all of the scientists emails, started calling them, and these are super hard people to get a hold of. And so they didn't call me back. So what I started to do was send them a daily snack via Uber Eats, just so that they saw Maxwell's name and said, hey, give me a call when you're able to.
Wow. And they called.
Well, they eventually did, and my number one pick to establish this therapy called and said, Amber, I wish I could help you, but I'm too busy. And I'm leaving for a conference tomorrow. And I said, oh, funny, I'm leaving for a conference tomorrow. I wasn't. I was in my pajamas. I hadn't showered for 4 days. I had 18-month-old twins. I was crying. And I totally lied. And he told me which conference he was going to. And I called my husband and I said, hey, you're on twin duty. I'm going to the airport. And I showed up. And he was sitting in the front row by himself. And I sat down right next to him.
What a stalker.
Total creeper.
What followed?
Well, he didn't file a restraining order. And
That's
I'm still very proud of that, but I would not hold it against him if he had. What happened after that was we went to a 4-hour dinner and established a plan to progress this therapy forward. And since that time, we have just had a snowball effect of success. But in order to make this gene replacement therapy happen, patient organizations must raise upwards of $7 million themselves to host a phase 1 clinical trial.
All right. So let me see if I can pull this together. Through sheer determination and being a stalker, you have found a therapy that could very well save your son's life. Mm-hmm. Now, it will cost, just to get to the first stage of this remarkable multi-year process to get to what your son needs, it's going to take $7 million, which will be a lot more than that, by the way. So you just wrote a check for $7 million. Because,
oh, I wish.
So where does the money come from?
Fundraising. GoFundMe. Speaking to every media outlet that will listen. Advocating 70 plus hours a week, not taking Christmas off.
Real quickly, what's the GoFundMe site?
GoFundMe is under Milestones for Maxwell.
Milestones for Maxwell.
Yes.
Milestones for Maxwell.
That is right. And our website is milestonesformaxwell.org.
I will go there right after this. All right. So I've talked to a lot of people and I've learned a lot about the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. And the United States has some really, really expensive drugs. My son, after his open heart surgery at just a few weeks old, needed a life-saving drug, and it was $1,000 a shot.
Oh my goodness.
Shot. I would blow through my healthcare deductible in the first week of January often. I mean, but because there was that $1,000 shot, my son is still alive and just devouring life. And I thank whoever figured out the procedures to save him, all the surgeries he's had since, all the drugs that have kept him going. It takes on average 12 years to bring from when a drug is designed, we found a molecule, to the point where a doctor can prescribe it easily. Mm-hmm. 12 years, at which point the pharmaceutical company has about 5 to 8 years to make all the profit needed to pay for those 12 years.
That's right.
So when you ask, why is it so expensive? It's because it took so much research and they were betting on it. They have to make enough money to pay for the research and development of that drug, but also for every failed drug they have.
Absolutely.
And other countries might steal the formula. It's just a formula. It is chemistry. It's not magic. And that's why it takes so long. It's why getting a COVID vaccine within a year is really pretty amazing. And it shows what happens when you can rip down a lot of barriers to get this going. So this Senate Bill 17 that you are very concerned with If it passes, it puts in these drug caps. Let me ask you, if a pharmaceutical company is going to do research to save Maxwell, and it's going to take them 12 years to get something before they can even sell it on the marketplace, and when they do, it will be capped at a price, why in the world would they do it?
They wouldn't. It stifles innovation. It provides an artificial pricing cap, and we all want cheaper drugs, right? But I wish this bill addressed all of the issues that make drug development so expensive. And one thing I would love to see in the bill is to piggyback off of COVID. How were we able to come up with so many vaccines in a year and cut through so much red tape? If we could take those lessons and incorporate those into a bill that could help people faster and cut through some of the bureaucratic red tape, I would be all for this bill. But just because you put a price cap on a drug doesn't mean it's any cheaper.
You think we'd learn the lesson with things like rent control? What happens to housing when you put in rent control? All with the best of objectives, all with the best of love, saying, we just want to make this cheaper. So let's just use our government magic wand and make it cheaper, with complete disregard to what happens from what you've just done. And the people you are going to kill, and I do mean kill later on, by stifling innovation in pharmaceuticals. You said you testified. Where was that?
I did. I testified on the Colorado State Capitol Hill.
Okay. How did that go?
You know, it went okay. I was supposed to speak at 1:30 and ended up speaking near 10 p.m. There is so much opposition to
By the way, you're
this
just
drug.
a mother of twins, one who is handicapped. It's not like you don't have the time.
No, it was an incredible inconvenience, but this is such an important issue. And I should also add that I am nowhere near a politician. I am very concerned on specific issues in our country, healthcare being number one.
You know, you're fighting this fight to save your son. And now, in order to do all this gargantuan stuff you need to get done, anyway, along comes politicians who want to basically destroy everything you're working for. So instead of working for your goal, you now have to spend your time battling away something that could destroy saving your son's life. And somehow, people who don't want price controls are the cruel ones. And I haven't quite figured that one out. I just haven't figured that one out. The guy I knew was on a board of a pharmaceutical company, and they were waiting for their trials. It cost them $1 million a month just to wait. No action one way or another, $1 million a month burn rate, just so that they could go and test a drug to see if it works. So the FDA just sat and sat and sat. Who knows, it could still be doing this. And that money's going away. And I wonder if those same bureaucrats, the people you testified in front of, focus their energy on fixing that system instead of a childish response of, well, we'll just limit prices. How many more lives could be saved?
I'm not even sure it could be measured because there are 7,000 rare diseases. If you combine the deaths from rare diseases every year, it's more than AIDS and cancer combined. 50% of all rare diseases affect children, and only 30% will live to see their 5th birthday. This bill is so well-meaning. There was so much intellectual horsepower in that room. And capping a drug price sounds great in theory, and insulin kept being used as an example. I wish it were as simple as insulin, but it is so much more complex, and this is such a simplified Band-Aid that doesn't address the underlying issues in this country.
You know, you probably felt this as well, which is this stuff just doesn't happen to me. This doesn't happen to my family. This can't happen to my family. You read about it in the paper. Excuse me, you read about people like you. But it can't happen to me, but it does.
It
and
does.
The statistic you just said is amazing, and it is the high probability of low probability events, and these people need help. All right, tell me what it is people can do to help you.
I need people to oppose this bill. I need people to contact their local representatives. And I also want to get my message across that we are all on board, that something needs to be done about drug pricing. But we need to give this a very thoughtful solution with all key stakeholders. The FDA, the NIH, and most importantly, the rare disease community, because we're taking the brunt of drug development costs. And we also have such a high unmet need. Rare disease patients, I've always admired the AIDS community for how they're able to come together for such an incredible cause. The advantage that the AIDS community has in advocating is that they have a window before they're very sick, where they can march on Washington and testify. And show their Kaposi sarcomas and what they're going through. Rare disease families are so beaten down and exhausted. You can't march on Washington well when your child's on a respirator. You can't testify before Congress when nobody can care for your children at home, and not even doctors can come and testify because they don't know enough about your disease. I really think nothing is going to change in the system until people become emotionally involved in the plight of many of these families and what it's like to have special needs.
What you said about the AIDS community is so dead on, in that this was a community, since it was largely the gay community that was already very politically activated. For when AIDS came, they were there to march on Washington. They were there to make their voices heard. And it's difficult with these genetic diseases for the reasons you just said, but also it's not a political thing.
No.
And so you're trying to get people to save your kid's life, that it's not something they understand because it's not going to happen to them. It's so very rare. What's the best outcome here?
The best outcome here is, one, to oppose this bill. But secondly, to understand that this is a bipartisan issue. Rare disease is a great equalizer. It doesn't care about race. It doesn't care about ethnicity. It doesn't care about income level. The best thing we could do to create a more equitable society is to create treatments for everyone affected by rare disease, to at least give children the starting point of being healthy, to decide how they want to live their life and then go and attack any social issue they want to.
Have you tried to talk to the governor about this?
I haven't had too much traction, but I hope to.
What do you mean you haven't had too much traction?
You know, I'm spread very thin every day, and I've contacted his aides, but just not heard back.
And what about the legislators that you're trying to pressure? Have you been able to have a conversation with them?
I haven't been able to have a one-on-one conversation with them yet.
You think that'll happen?
I
hope
so.
This interview helps both, that you can sit down and have a face-to-face with the governor about this, and those well-meaning people who are going to do so much damage to kids like yours in the future. And I think they are just completely blind to it.
What I'm hoping, I thought Senator Smallwood did an incredible job of pointing out some of the unanswered questions in the bill. And like I've said, the people who wrote this bill are incredibly well-meaning. And this is an opportunity to morph this bill into something that can actually address multiple issues on every front. And I hope to do just that.
Tell you what, let me wrap this up with a couple of questions. We all have hopes for our kids. When I found out that my son Chance had Down syndrome, it was really hard. I mean, maybe I was still grieving over the loss of my daughter Parker, but it was just hard. And I thought, I see people with Down syndrome maybe bagging groceries, and I'm thinking, I don't want my kid bagging groceries. This is, I want more for him than that. And now, 16 years down the road, I can see how happy my son might be bagging groceries and working with people and loving every minute of it. And it has changed the way I see a lot of the world. And I am very grateful to him for that. But it doesn't mean I don't still have hopes for him. I have hopes that he can toilet himself. I have hopes that maybe he can speak clearly someday. These are my hopes and dreams for him. And it's been frustrating when the government hasn't helped, has denied an education for a year. What's the hope you have for Maxwell?
Oh my goodness, well, that will make me cry, but I want him to be the best version of himself he can be. And I want him to be healthy and just be able to decide what he wants to do in life and not be comatose or die in his sleep of sudden unexpected death in epileptic patients. I want him to be his sister's best friend. I want him to be able to run in the park. I want him to watch Frozen. My hopes and dreams are simply for health and happiness, whatever that looks like for him.
And it's simple things.
Simple.
It's bagging groceries. That would be awesome.
It would be the biggest win for me.
I think you're amazing. And I hope everyone watching this calls their legislators and makes sure that kids like Maxwell have a shot.
I hope the legislators also call me and incorporate the National Organization of Rare Diseases and organizations like Global Genes and the Rare Disease Caucus into their decision making, because together we can change this world for the better. And I am so excited to do that for kids like Chance and Maxwell.
Thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.